You know, it's funny how your brain can flag something as being off way before you're willing to consciously accept it. It's that little voice in the back of your head, the one you dismiss as paranoia or anxiety. I was 23 when I learned the hard way that you should always listen to that voice. I'd been living on my own for about a year, in a decent little townhouse my parents helped me get into. I was working a pretty demanding job in software development, which meant my social life was, shall we say, underdeveloped. So like most people my age, I turned to the dating apps. It's a digital meat market, a wasteland of ghosting and awkward small talk, but I figured it was worth a shot. That's how I met Chloe. Her profile was normal enough. A couple of pictures with friends, one with a golden retriever, the standard bio about loving hiking and tacos. We matched, and after a few days of pretty engaging texting, we decided to meet up. Our first date was just coffee. It's my go-to for a first meeting, low stakes, easy escape route if necessary. It was fine. Less than an hour, really just a vibe check to make sure she wasn't a catfish and could hold a conversation. She seemed cool, a little intense in the way she held eye contact, but I chalked it up to nerves. We agreed to see each other again. Date number 2 was at a local bar, one of those dimly lit places with a good craft beer selection. This time, things felt more relaxed. We both had a couple of drinks, got a nice little buzz going, and the conversation flowed easily. We talked about work, terrible movies we loved, and dreams of traveling. It was a genuinely nice time, and it ended with a hug and a promise for a third date. I went home feeling optimistic, thinking maybe I'd finally found someone I could connect with. The third date was dinner, and this is when that little voice in my head started to whisper. We were at a nice Italian place, and throughout the meal, I started noticing things. Little quirks in her behavior that felt off. For instance, she'd ask a question, but then her eyes would drift over my shoulder while I was answering, like she was scanning the room. Then she'd snap back into focus with that same unnerving intensity. At one point, our waitress, who was probably my age, laughed at a dumb joke I made, and Chloe's demeanor instantly frosted over. She didn't say anything, but her jaw tightened, and she barely looked at the waitress for the rest of the meal. It was subtle, the kind of thing you'd feel crazy for bringing up. But it was there. Still, the date ended with a kiss. Our first and, as it turned out, only one. It wasn't bad, but it didn't feel electric either. It felt calculated, but I ignored the feeling. I told myself that because I let her kiss me, the date must have gone well. I was letting my hope override my intuition. A couple of weeks went by before our fourth and final date. We went out for drinks again, back to the same bar. This time, though, I went in with a less excited mindset. I was on high alert, paying attention to those little mannerisms I'd brushed off before. It's hard to explain exactly what it was. It wasn't just one thing, but a collection of small behaviors that, when pieced together, painted a picture of someone who was deeply antisocial and, frankly, borderline creepy. She started drinking way too much on this date. With every drink, her filters seemed to dissolve. She became incredibly touchy-feely, constantly grabbing my arm, putting her hand on my knee. I'm not big on PDA, especially not when we're sitting elbow to elbow with strangers at a crowded bar. She kept leaning in, trying to kiss me, and I'd have to politely turn my head and deflect. After the third time, I could feel the mood shift. Her smile became strained. I felt a knot of anxiety tighten in my stomach. I mentioned I was tired and had an early start tomorrow, heavily implying we should call it a night. She stared at me for a beat, her eyes cold, before her expression smoothed over into a tight smile. "Of course," she said. She flagged down the bartender, paid the check, and we grabbed our coats and left. The cold night air was a relief. As we were walking toward the parking lot where our cars were, she stopped me under a flickering street lamp. "Can I come home with you?" she asked, her voice blunt, all pretense of charm gone. Not tonight," I said, forcing a casual tone. "I'm really tired and have that early meeting tomorrow." It was a total lie. She didn't miss a beat. "I'll make sure you get up on time." I can even drive you to work." The offer was absurd. She was visibly intoxicated. The thought of her not only driving herself home, but also trying to drive my car in the morning was insane. That was it for me. The gut feeling I'd been ignoring was now screaming at me. "No, Chloe, I'm just going to head home." I made the decision right there that I would not be seeing her again. I got into my car and started the drive home, going slowly because I'd had a couple of drinks myself. I wasn't drunk, but I was being cautious. My senses felt heightened, and I was scanning my mirrors for cops. That's probably why I noticed a pair of familiar headlights. The same car was still behind me after my first turn, and my second. After the third turn, as I sat at a deserted intersection, the dread solidified in my gut. It was Chloe's car. My hands were shaking as I picked up my phone and texted her. "Are you following me?" The reply came back almost instantly. "Yes. I just want to make sure you get home okay." My heart hammered against my ribs. This wasn't okay. This was terrifying. I tried calling her, but it went straight to voicemail. This was so deeply weird. I pulled over to the side of the road, my hazard lights blinking in the darkness, and texted again. "Stop following me. I'm fine." I watched in my rearview mirror as her car paused in the middle of the street. For a moment, I thought she was going to get out. Then, her car accelerated and sped past me, disappearing into the night. She didn't text back. I waited a few minutes, my heart still pounding, before I finally drove the rest of the way home. I was in bed when my phone lit up with a text from her. "Hope I didn't weird you out tonight. Sorry I got so drunk. Next time we should do something more low-key, like dinner at my place or something." I didn't answer. The next morning, another text. "Oh no, is the vibe dead?" I still didn't reply. I needed to figure out how to handle this. Not even 2 hours later, a single, demanding question mark appeared. That's when I knew I couldn't put it off any longer. I typed out my response carefully. "Hey, I had a great time getting to know you, but I just think our personalities don't click that much. I also really just want to focus on myself right now. I hope you understand." Then the angry text started. The worst one was, "No, I don't understand. You strung me along for 4 dates to tell me that. How about you pay me back half of everything I spent on you?" There were others, filled with personal insults and a venom that shocked me. I blocked her number immediately. I thought that would be the end of it, but then came the phone calls. Non-stop from no-caller ID numbers. I ignored them all, and after a full day of my phone buzzing incessantly, they finally stopped. The next day, I came home from work to find a bouquet of cheap-looking carnations on my front stoop. Tucked inside was a card. It was a long, rambling apology from Chloe, asking for a second chance. She knew where I lived. A cold wave of fear washed over me. In her mind, this was probably a grand, romantic gesture. To me, it was an invasion. It was a threat. I unblocked her number long enough to send one final text. "Do not contact me anymore. Never come to my house again, or I will file for a restraining order." I blocked her again immediately, so I wouldn't have to see her response. I couldn't be sure, but I felt like things were far from over. I was right. About a week later, I was home alone for the night. My townhouse has 2 floors, and my bedroom is at the very top, overlooking the quiet suburban street. I woke up in the middle of the night to a sound. I wasn't sure what it was at first, just a faint noise from downstairs that had pulled me from my sleep. I laid there, frozen, listening. Then I heard it again, clearer this time. A floorboard creaking in the hallway. My blood ran cold. Then, I heard the unmistakable click of a door opening. Not downstairs. It was one of the doors in the upstairs hallway, right outside my bedroom. The guest room door. A door I always kept closed. My mind screamed, "Intruder." My training from years of watching horror movies kicked in. I didn't scream. I slid silently out of my bed and onto the floor, shimmying under the bed frame, pulling the comforter down to conceal myself. My hands were trembling so violently I could barely unlock my phone. I dialed 911, keeping the phone clutched to my chest, not daring to hit call just yet. Then my bedroom door creaked open. Footsteps, soft and cautious, moved across the carpeted floor toward my bed. The whole room was carpeted, so the sounds were muffled. Then I heard the sound of my dresser drawers being pulled open, one by one. A soft rustling. I held my hand over my mouth, trying to stifle the sound of my own ragged breathing. I could feel my heart trying to beat its way out of my chest. Then a woman's voice muttered under her breath. God damn it. It was Chloe. I didn't move. I prayed my phone wouldn't light up with a notification. I heard more rummaging, more drawers opening and closing. She was going through all my things. What was she looking for? Then the mattress above me dipped. She sat down on my bed. I was staring at the outline of two shoes through the thin fabric of the bed skirt. They were just inches from my face. I don't know what she was doing, just sitting there in the dark. She sat there for what felt like an eternity, maybe 2 or 3 minutes of absolute, terrifying silence. Then, the mattress shifted as she stood up. I heard her mutter one more time, "Fucking liar." I heard the drawers slide shut. Her footsteps walked back toward the door. It closed with a soft click, and then I heard her moving back down the stairs. I stayed under the bed, shaking, listening until I was sure she was gone. I hit call on my phone, whispering my address and the situation to the 911 operator. She told me to stay on the line and stay hidden. Those were the longest 10 minutes of my life. When I saw the flashing blue and red lights through the window, I crawled out from under the bed and crept downstairs to let the police in. They did a full sweep of the house. Another officer arrived and they searched everywhere. Every closet, under the couches, even the small crawl space in the hall closet. They found how she got in. A window in the dining room, which I'd left unlocked, was just big enough for someone to crawl through. She must have squeezed past the bushes and climbed in. I gave them my statement, showed them the texts, told them everything. But without solid proof she was the one in the house, they said it was a tricky situation. The case eventually lost steam. I did, however, get a restraining order. I was advised to never accuse her of the break-in directly, and to never, ever contact her again. She respected the order, thankfully. But for the rest of the time I lived in that house, I never felt safe. I bought new locks, security cameras, a bar for the sliding door. Every time a car that looked like hers drove down my street, my stomach would drop. Even now, in a different city, a different home, I sometimes get this cold feeling that she might find out where I live. You can change the locks, but you can't change the feeling of knowing someone was in your room while you were sleeping, just inches away, sitting on your bed in the dark. I've always been a quiet person, an observer. It's probably why I got into graphic design and photography in the first place. My final year at university, my entire world revolved around my capstone project. It was my baby, my ticket to a decent job, and I'd been pouring every spare second into it. The concept was about the feeling of being watched in the digital age, a sort of commentary on modern surveillance. I called it the observer effect. The irony still haunts me. My life was a simple, predictable loop: class, library, the 24-hour design lab, and my small, ground-floor apartment just off campus. It was in the sterile, fluorescent hum of the design lab, sometime around 2 a.m., that my nightmare began. I was hunched over my monitor, tweaking the color balance on a photo I'd taken of a lone figure on a subway platform, when someone pulled up a chair next to me. It was Maya. She was in my program, a familiar face from a few prerequisite classes we'd shared. She had a reputation for being fiercely competitive, the kind of artist who lived and breathed their work with an unnerving intensity. "That's a strong concept, Alex," she said, her eyes fixed on my screen. "The observer effect. I like it." "Oh, thanks," I mumbled, a little startled. We'd never really spoken before. Just trying to get it finished. "The feeling of being watched by an unseen entity," she continued, almost to herself, ignoring my comment. "It's so relevant. Your use of deep shadows and isolated subjects really sells it. Where do you find your locations?" We ended up talking for nearly an hour. She was incredibly insightful, asking sharp, specific questions about my technique and my artistic motivations. It was the most anyone had ever engaged with my work. When I finally packed up to leave, she was still there, her own project seemingly forgotten, staring thoughtfully at my empty workstation. I walked home feeling a strange mix of flattery and unease. A few days later, she found me in the campus coffee shop. "I've been thinking about your project," she said, sliding into the seat across from me without asking. She launched into a stream of constructive criticism, but it felt less like feedback and more like a set of instructions. "You should try shooting at the old train yard by the river," she suggested. "The decay there would really complement your themes." The weird part, I was just at that train yard the day before, scouting for shots. I'd never mentioned it to anyone. I told myself it was a coincidence, a lucky guess, but then she kept going. She suggested the specific bench in the campus quad where I ate lunch, the corner of the library I always sat in, the alleyway behind the art building with the striking graffiti. These weren't just locations, they were coordinates of my daily life. A cold knot formed in my stomach. I gave a non-committal shrug and made an excuse to leave, but the brief, knowing smile she gave me as I walked away was deeply unsettling. That's when I started seeing her. Not just in the art building, but everywhere. I'd be in the coffee shop, and I'd look up to see her sitting in a corner, staring. I'd be walking to class, and I'd catch a glimpse of her across the street, quickly looking away when our eyes met. Was I being paranoid? We went to the same university, used the same facilities. It had to be a coincidence. I tried to force myself to believe that. The real turning point, the moment my denial shattered, happened about a week later. I decided to shake things up, to go somewhere completely new and random to break my routine. I took a bus to a part of the city I'd never been to before, an old industrial park that was now completely deserted. It was perfect for my project, eerie, isolated, and visually arresting. I found a spot near a rusted-out loading dock and was setting up my tripod when my eyes landed on something out of place. Sitting on the grimy concrete, right in the center of my intended shot, was a small, perfectly folded origami crane. My blood ran cold. I knew that crane. Maya had done an entire series on origami in our first year. She would leave them everywhere. It was her signature. It was a message, as clear as a handwritten note. "I know where you are. I was here before you." I packed up my gear, my hands shaking, and took the next bus back to campus, feeling like I was being watched the entire way. The paranoia was no longer a quiet whisper. It was a constant, deafening scream in my head. I started to document everything. I took pictures of her when I saw her watching me. I saved screenshots of her lingering on my social media stories. I needed proof that I wasn't losing my mind. Then an email arrived. It was from her university address. The subject line read, "Project Synergy." My heart hammered against my ribs as I clicked it open. The body of the email was short. "Alex, I feel like our work is evolving on a parallel path. We should talk." Attached was a zip file. With a sickening sense of dread, I downloaded and opened it. It contained dozens of photographs. They were photos of me. Me working in the lab late at night, shot through the window. Me eating lunch on that specific park bench, a long lens shot from across the quad. Me walking home, my back to the camera. Me standing outside my own apartment building, fumbling for my keys. They were all shot in my exact artistic style. The same high-contrast black and white, the same deep shadows, the same feeling of voyeuristic isolation. She had copied my entire aesthetic and turned me into the subject. I felt violated, exposed. This wasn't art. This was a meticulously documented campaign of stalking. She had turned my own creative vision into a weapon against me. I fired back a furious email, telling her she had crossed a line, that this was harassment, and that if she didn't stop and delete the photos, I was going straight to the dean. Her reply came within minutes. It was chillingly calm and manipulative. She accused me of being threatened by her talent, of trying to silence her artistic voice. She claimed I couldn't handle a female artist recontextualizing the male gaze. She was twisting my genuine fear into a petty, professional squabble. She ended the email with a line that made my skin crawl. "You inspired me, Alex. You are my muse. You should be flattered." I knew then that the administration wouldn't be enough. I needed undeniable proof that she was a threat. My ground floor apartment had a large window that faced a narrow, poorly lit alley. I had a strong, gut-wrenching suspicion that she'd been there. I bought a cheap motion-activated webcam and positioned it on my desk, facing out the window. If she came back, I would have her. For 3 nights, nothing. The camera didn't trigger once. A small, foolish part of me started to hope that my threat had worked, that she had finally backed off. On the 4th night, I was woken from a dead sleep by the soft chime of a new file being saved to my laptop. My mouth was dry. My hands trembled as I sat up and played the video. The timestamp was 3:17 a.m. The footage was grainy, showing the dark alley and the rain-streaked glass of my window. For 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, a shape emerged from the darkness. A face pressed against the glass. It was Maya. Her eyes were wide, her expression eerily blank. But she wasn't looking at the camera. She was looking past it, at my bed, at me. My breath hitched in my throat. She stayed there, pressed against the window, for what felt like an eternity. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand. She held up her phone, turning the screen to face the window. On her phone was a video. It was a live feed of me, sleeping in my bed. It was shot from inside my room. A wave of pure terror and confusion washed over me. How? How was she seeing me? I scrambled out of bed, my eyes darting wildly around my room, searching for the source. And then I saw it. Plugged into the wall outlet across from my bed, the one I never used, was a small black USB charger. A charger I didn't own. Embedded in its surface was a pinprick-sized hole. A camera lens. I looked back at my laptop screen. The footage was still playing. Maya, still outside my window, watching the feed of me sleeping on her phone, slowly lifted a finger to her lips in a silent, shushing gesture. A small, triumphant smile played on her lips. Then, she melted back into the darkness and was gone. I don't remember making a conscious decision. I just reacted. I ripped the camera from the wall, grabbed my laptop and my keys, and sprinted out of my apartment into the cold, rainy night. I called the police from the safety of my locked car, my voice shaking so badly I could barely give the dispatcher my address. The aftermath was a blur of police reports and university tribunals. The footage from my webcam and the hidden camera was undeniable. She was expelled and hit with a multi-year restraining order. The legal proceedings were messy and exhausting, but in the end, her art project was recognized for what it was, a terrifying obsession. I had to move, of course. I couldn't spend another night in that apartment. I finished my degree, but the passion I once had for my art is gone, replaced by a lingering, toxic paranoia. I can't stand in front of a window at night. I cover my laptop camera. Every time I see someone holding up a phone, I feel a jolt of panic. She took my passion, my art, the very thing I used to make sense of the world, and twisted it into a tool to terrorize me. She made her obsession my reality, and I'm terrified I'll be living inside her observer effect for the rest of my life. After years of living in noisy, cramped apartment buildings, I was finally ready for an upgrade. At 25, I was making a decent living as a freelance video editor, and since I worked from home, I craved a bit more space and a lot more quiet. I found what seemed like the perfect solution, a nice duplex on a quiet, tree-lined street. It had a dedicated room for my office and only one shared wall. For the first time in my adult life, I thought I might actually get to know my neighbor. I should have been more careful what I wished for. His name was Howard. He was a man in his late 50s or early 60s, with a soft paunch, friendly eyes, and a lonely air about him. The day I was moving my last box in, He came over with a plate of still warm chocolate chip cookies. He gave me the whole welcome wagon speech, the trash pickup schedule, the best local pizza place, which mailman to look out for. "It's a good, quiet neighborhood," he said, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Glad to have a new neighbor. The last fellow was a bit of a hermit." He gestured toward our shared wall. "The walls are a little thin," he added with a chuckle. "So my apologies in advance if my TV is ever too loud." At first, his friendliness was nice. It felt like the kind of neighborly connection people just don't have anymore. But nice quickly curdled into needy, and then into something far more unsettling. He seemed to have an almost supernatural sense of when I was coming or going. The moment I'd step outside, his front door would open, and he'd be there, ready for a long, rambling chat. It got to the point where I would peek through my blinds before leaving, trying to time my exit for when he wasn't lurking by his window. Then came the comments. They were always disguised as casual observations. "Burning the midnight oil again last night, Ben? Heard that keyboard of yours clicking away, till the wee hours," he'd say with a wink. Or, "Sounds like you had friends over on Friday. Hope you guys had fun." I work with audio for a living. I'm sensitive to sound. My keyboard is virtually silent, and I always keep my music or any conversation at a respectable volume. There was no way he could hear these things so clearly unless he was actively listening. That chuckling comment about the thin walls started to feel less like a friendly warning and more like a confession. The duplex had a shared, unfinished basement that was divided by a flimsy, uninsulated wooden partition. Each side had its own rickety door at the top of a set of concrete stairs. About a month after I moved in, I went down to my side to store some old equipment. A few of my boxes, which I'd stacked neatly against the far wall, were slightly out of place. I figured they'd just settled. But as I was leaving, I noticed something on the dusty concrete floor near the base of the partition. It was a small, plastic box with a little antenna, the receiver for an old-school baby monitor. It wasn't on, but it had the scuffed, well-used look of a familiar object. A cold dread washed over me. He wasn't just passively overhearing my life through the wall. He had an open line. I took the device upstairs, my mind racing. I didn't confront him. How could I? He would just deny it, call me the crazy new neighbor. Instead, I started being quiet. I wore headphones constantly. I communicated with friends via text, even when they were in the same room. I turned my home, my sanctuary, into a fortress of silence. But my silence only seemed to make him more desperate for a connection. He started leaving gifts for me on the small porch we shared. First, it was a newspaper. Then, a bag of bagels from the good bakery he liked. I would throw them away, my stomach twisting with unease. The breaking point came one Tuesday morning. I opened my front door to find a brand new, high-end ergonomic mousepad sitting on my welcome mat. Later that day, as I was getting my mail, Howard popped out of his house. "Morning, Ben," he chirped. "So you got your new mousepad. I have one just like it. It'll do wonders for your wrist, trust me." I just stared at him, my blood running cold. My office is in a back room. The window faces my own small, fenced-in backyard. There are no other houses back there. No angle from his property provides a line of sight. The only way Howard could possibly know what kind of mousepad I used was if he had been in my yard, peering through my window. The mask of the friendly, lonely old man was gone. All I could see now was a predator. That night, I ordered 3 small, discreet security cameras online. When they arrived, I placed one in my living room, disguised on a bookshelf. I put another in the hallway. The last one, I put in my office, aimed directly at the window he must have looked through. For a week, I watched the feeds obsessively. Nothing. The cameras showed nothing but an empty, silent house. I started to question myself. Was I overreacting? Was this all just a string of bizarre coincidences? Then on a Friday afternoon, I was at the grocery store, standing in the produce aisle, when my phone buzzed with a notification. Motion detected in living room. My heart leaped into my throat. I opened the app, and my screen filled with a live feed from my living room camera. The image was crystal clear, and standing in the middle of my living room was Howard. I watched, frozen in the middle of the grocery store, as he let himself into my home using his own key. He didn't look like a thief. He wasn't rushing or frantically searching for valuables. He moved with a slow, deliberate calmness. He walked through my living room, his head on a swivel, not stealing, just looking, observing. He ran a hand over the back of my sofa. He adjusted a picture frame on the wall that was slightly crooked. He then walked into my office. The second camera picked him up. He stood behind my desk chair for a long, unnerving moment. He placed his hands on the armrests, as if imagining himself sitting there. Then, he did something that made me feel physically ill. He walked over to the shared wall, pressed his ear firmly against it, and closed his eyes. He stood like that for almost a full minute, a look of serene concentration on his face, as if he were listening to the house's heartbeat. The tour continued. He went into my kitchen, opened the fridge, and just stared inside. He went into my bedroom. My camera in the hall caught him opening my closet door. He didn't take anything. He just gently thumbed through my clothes, his fingers brushing against the sleeve of a jacket. It was an act of profound violation, an assertion of ownership. He was moving through my home as if it were his own. I fumbled with my phone, my hands shaking too much to even dial. I abandoned my shopping cart and sprinted to my car. As I sped home, I finally managed to call 911, babbling to the dispatcher that my neighbor had broken into my house, and I had it on video. I screeched to a halt in my driveway, just as Howard was stepping out of my front door, turning to lock it behind him with his key. At that exact moment, a police cruiser pulled up behind me, its lights flashing. Caught red-handed, Howard's friendly facade finally shattered. He wasn't apologetic or scared. He was indignant. "What's all this then?" he snapped at the officers. "I was just keeping an eye on the place for the boy. He's so busy, I help out." He glared at me. "This is the thanks I get. Some people are so ungrateful." The police found the key in his pocket. A search of his unit uncovered a journal filled with meticulously detailed notes about my schedule, my habits, my visitors. They found a small collection of my things he'd stolen, not valuables, but intimate items. A spare toothbrush still in its package, a single sock, a pen from my desk. He hadn't been a neighbor. He'd been a curator, collecting pieces of my life. I broke the lease and moved out a week later. I live in a high-rise apartment building now, as far from the ground as I can get. The anonymity of 100 other residents is a comfort. But sometimes, in the dead of night, when the building is quiet, I'll hear a faint noise from the apartment next door, a TV, a muffled conversation. And in that moment, I'm right back in that duplex, feeling the phantom pressure of an ear against the wall. And I remember that the most terrifying monsters are the ones that greet you with a smile and a plate of warm cookies.